It was the founder's dream to have this aircraft. And he flew on it 10 times and unfortunately passed away. After that, the family really never used the aircraft. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know the purpose of it. It sat kind of like a white elephant for years. Private aviation is helping families and busy high net worth individuals and executives double, triple, 4x, 10x their productivity, their effectiveness by utilizing their time in the very best way possible. Relationship building is one of the key skills that, not just relationship building, but relationship tending. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the industry that are new and they do take advantage of people. I think mental health, especially for men, is something that is critically important. Essentially, what I've really tried to understand is what the family office is all about. And what I've been able to discover is that the family office is ultimately, at a 30,000 foot level, is ultimately about.
Welcome to Theory of Change. Today, we will dive into a conversation about private aviation and legacy building for entrepreneurial families and busy parents who want to build wealth without compromising their family. We will talk about the language, the frameworks, and the relationships around private aviation from the point of view of the family. Today's guest has spent 30 years on the inside of one of the most misunderstood assets a wealthy family can hold, the private jet. But what he's really built is a way of thinking about wealth, mobility, and legacy that I think is going to shift something for you. David Clark is the founder and managing director of Integris Aviation Consultancy, a Minneapolis-based firm that has overseen over $150 million in private transactions in aircraft for some of the world's most sophisticated family offices and corporations. David is an FAA certified pilot, an NBAA certified aviation manager, a Worth magazine leading advisor, and a regular speaker at the corporate jet investor conferences in London, Sao Paulo, and Miami. He built his practice across 2 continents, spending close to 2 decades in Brazil, and he approaches aviation not as a transaction, but as a strategic tool for family legacy. David, welcome to Theory of Change.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Very glad to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. You have a master's degree in theology, and you spent nearly 2 decades in Brazil, and you ended up as one of the most respected voices in private aviation. Walk me through the arc of what happened.
Well, and that's a really good question. As most people in life, your life takes twists and turns, and you described it best when you said it's as an arc. My arc started growing up overseas in Brazil. My parents worked for a mission, and I went to an American high school in South America there, and that's where I gained my love for flying and wanted to get into the aviation business, and was all set to come to the greatest aviation university in the world in Daytona Beach, Florida. And 2 weeks before I came up to the U.S. to go to college, to university, my father suddenly passed away at the age of 18. And that was a significant moment in my life. I really, it just shook me to the core, as it would any 18-year-old, as it does anybody, to lose a father. But at the time, I had, a desire to maybe finish what he had started, because he passed away quite young. He was only 51 years old. And so, I also went to aviation school, which he also was a pilot, but, he was also working in a mission. So I decided to get a theology degree, and that's what led me to get a master's degree in theology. I thought I would be going to do what he had been doing and finishing what he had started. Life didn't turn out that way, but the theology degree has had everything to do with what I'm doing today in advising families on family offices and families on aviation. And I know that that might not seem congruous at first, but as I have a chance to explain that, I think it'll make sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We will come to that. Today marks the Saturday where the Real Mental Health Foundation goes for a walk to raise awareness for men's mental health. And just before we continue the conversation, I would like to pause for a second and ask you, what does mental health play uh, in your life regarding that powerful moment very early on, and how you approach relationships and how you have built your life from that moment on?
Well, it's a very important issue for me. The real is something that I'm very proud to be a part of. I really believe in the mission. I think mental health, especially for men, is something that is critically important, especially for the role that we play in society, in our families, and our businesses. And and looks can be deceiving. You can see somebody on the outside and see that, think that they're put together, that everything's going fine, they're successful, however we define success. But on the inside, they can just be really struggling with a lot of different things and just their own sense of self worth and so many issues. My family has struggled with mental health in a number of different areas. I had a younger brother who struggled deeply with mental health. My father struggled with mental health. I've had my own struggles as well. So it's just something I think that, you know, it's becoming normalized, hopefully, more to talk about it. It's not a stigma. It's not something to be embarrassed about. If you have mental health issues, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't just decrease your significance in any way. But it needs to be addressed. And I think the whole movement that the Real has started, where we're just getting men together and just walking. Like, how brilliant is that? Like, it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require too much equipment or anything. It's just you find a nice day and you find somebody to walk with you and you go walking. And if even it's not a nice day, you can find a mall or some indoor space to walk. So to me, it's just a critically important issue. It's something, like I said, my family has struggled with. I've struggled with it as well. Some of it stemming to the fact that I lost my father at a young age. That is, as the saying goes, it rocks your world. And, we need to be able to find ways to deal with that. And that's what the Real is doing. And I'm just so happy to be a part of it.
I I was listening to someone who told me there is a moment for grief and then there is a moment for heroism. It was actually a podcast about the massacre in Israel on of October 7th. And so we battle with the grief of loss. I encountered it too in my life, and it has completely rattled me, and it's taken me 2 decades to get back onto the saddle. And so we you and I met through our passion for multi-generational family cohesion and legacy building, which is very important to both of us. So um, mental health plays a very important part within a family, I believe, and destigmatizing and lowering the bar for men to come forward with their mental health situation, let's say, is something that we both speak to. Now, I wanna see how we can close the circle and see how private aviation comes into into the picture here. Maybe I've prepared a framework for us for the conversation, but let me start with this question: how does private aviation come into the conversation of a family as a tool, as a strategic tool to create the legacy?
Well, and that's exactly what I've been trying to unpack and discover over the last 6 or 7 years. And essentially, what I've really tried to understand is what the family office is all about. And what I've been able to discover is that the family office is ultimately, at a 30,000 foot level, is ultimately about continuing and furthering the legacy of the founders. I mean, that's what it's really all about, is making sure that their legacy gets passed down through the generations. And a lot of times we think about that in strictly financial terms, right? Resources, wealth. And so a lot of attention gets given to the money, the wealth, the financial resources, the assets. And that's important, absolutely. And that's one of the main missions of the family office, is to make sure that money never runs out. And we know the statistics that, unfortunately, by generation 3 or generation 4, most families do run out of money. This is not a theoretical problem. This is a real problem. And so the money can run out, the money does run out, and it's very important that family offices make sure that the money never runs out. But it's not just the money. It is the legacy. It is the values. It is all these things that were started by generation 1 in this in whatever family that you're talking about, and have to be intentionally created a structure so that those values, that legacy, gets passed down through the generations, right down into generation 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. And the further out you go, the more difficult it is. But that's where, day by day, month by month, this family must, with intention, keep that train on those rails. The private aviation is critical to the legacy planning and the legacy fulfillment of the family office, because it provides the mobility necessary for the family to engage in the activities that are going to further the legacy of the founders. And those activities primarily revolve around further business interests. If they've sold their company, they've had a liquidity event, well, they're still going to be investing in startups and doing other business. So there's still going to be some kind of businesses going on. There's philanthropic activities, where now the family is changing its role from wealth gathering to wealth distributing. So now they're doing more philanthropic activities, going to different events, fundraisers, visiting partners, visiting projects that they might be supporting in other countries. So philanthropic are some of the activities that that family needs to be involved in order to further the legacy of the founders. And then the third area is personal travel, is keeping that family together. It's going shared experiences, having vacations together, going on different trips together, and gathering the family at the family vacation home for their family meetings once a quarter or once every 3 to 6 months, where they're getting and sitting down and having the family meeting. So the aircraft is used to be able to do that, to gather the family and to bring everybody in, to be able to then have this meeting and promote those times that provide the stickiness of the family. Because if you don't have those shared experiences, then the family will slowly start to drift apart, especially where families live in different places. So the aircraft, the aviation program is what I call it, more than just an airplane. You could have a charter program or a fractional share, but it's still an aviation program that family has, is critical. It's the primary mobility tool in order to be able to help the family do more in less time. And so, that's really what it's about. It's an essential ingredient in the overall box, toolbox that the family office has in order to make sure that not only does the money not run out, but the legacy doesn't run out, the purpose doesn't run out, the values don't run out. And so, can you have a family office without using aviation? Sure, you can do that. But I would submit that you're going to do it better, and you're going to be able to do more in less time if you use private aviation, because that's what it's all about. That really is the value of it. It's allowing you to do more in less time, and that's why it's such a valuable tool.
Do you have an example, like a case study, maybe on the negative or presumably negative, as well as on the positive? Because it seems the conversation about values, and I know people, we know people who specialize in helping families have these conversations about the families, right? And and you're saying that the aircraft is an excellent tool for condensing the timelines and allowing the family to be together or being in different places faster and then coming back home. One of your taglines that we discussed earlier was you help busy parents add 30 or 40 nights with their children at home through the private aviation program. To make it tangible for the listeners, what's a story where the family office didn't have the aviation program? How did the family look like before? What shift did you see as they were implementing and developing the program? And then what were the results for these families?
Well, I mean, I think of one family that had the founder purchased an aircraft, um, and it was a large transcontinental aircraft, basically able to fly pretty much nonstop anywhere in the world. It was a big airplane. It was the founder's dream to have this aircraft, and he flew on it 10 times and unfortunately passed away from an illness thereafter. And after that, the family really never used the aircraft. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know the purpose of it. Nobody had explained to them just the importance of this tool. And so it sat kind of like a white elephant for years. And, it would make some occasional trips, but it was very lightly used, and it wasn't embraced by the family as the asset that it should have been, because it wasn't part of the family culture. It was always seen as dad's airplane. It wasn't the family airplane. And there was no family aviation program. And so I think what happened there was then that they really missed out on on having these shared experiences, on doing things, on going places, on developing new businesses. The opportunity cost was huge. And the thing about opportunity cost is it's very difficult to measure opportunity cost in certain cases. And so, but there's a cost. So if you had a tool literally sitting in your hangar, fueled up, ready to go with pilots, insurance, everything, and you didn't use it, and you could have gone and had a wonderful 2-week vacation with the grandparents and the grandkids and just had that just priceless moment that you created, but you didn't. What's the cost of that? It's incalculable. You can't put a price on that. So that's kind of an example of I think how not to do it. I think that there's other examples of families that have fully embraced aviation, and I think of a family here in the U.S. that I worked with that has embraced aviation, and they have a very sophisticated aviation program within the family office to do these very things, to support the family in its activities that are going to further the legacy of their founders. And so they have a 30-page use policy. They have a committee in the family office that meets monthly to talk about all the aviation issues and the logistics and upcoming maintenance and retirements and then just all the things that are coming when it comes to aviation. And they have a very detailed policy as to who gets to use the aircraft, what do the chargebacks look like, what's the pecking order, the priority order as to who who gets to bump who. If two people want to use the airplane on the same day, they have an additional uh, charter company that provides hours in case there's two different trips that have to happen on the same day. So it's very well structured, and it's very intentional, and it's worked out great because they put so much intention to it, and it really has promoted that family unity, and it's promoted the fact that that family is. I mean, there's a very low chance that that family is going to either run out of money or run out of legacy anytime soon because they've been so intentional about it. So there's right ways of doing it. There's wrong ways of doing it. I like to help people figure out what the right way is of doing this, and not just how or what, but why. Like, why have a private aviation program? And to touch on the mental health issue as well, I would submit to you that a family, especially maybe a younger family that's still building their business, they're on the road a lot, but they're able to use the aviation program to get home more often and not miss as many precious moments with their kids, especially when their kids are growing up. That can only help the mental health of the parents. Being at home an extra 30 or 40 nights a year can only help the mental health of the children as they're growing up, and not having to have so many nights where mom or dad are gone because they're out on business. And so, it's just one of the extra benefits of it, that it really does promote. Ultimately, it promotes better relationships. There was a one of the golfers at the Augusta National was on the news here last week, and the story was that he was able to drop his daughter off at school, and he lived in Jupiter, Florida. He was able to drop his daughter off at school, jump on a plane, fly up to Augusta, play a practice round of golf before the tournament, and come home in time for dinner with his family. How else could you do that if you didn't have private aviation? And yet that's just a decision that probably cost, a lot of money to do that. But in this golfer's mind, he's like, you know what? I love golf. Golf is my livelihood, but I'm not going to sacrifice my family because of it. I'm going to do both. I'm going to do really well at golf, but I'm also going to do really well at being a father. And that's what it's about. And so, um, does that promote mental health? Absolutely, it does. It promotes mental health for everybody: the mom, the dad, the kids. It really, when dad makes that kind of a sacrifice to be home for dinner and to be able to drop his daughter off at school and not miss that precious moment, how can you put a price on that? You can't. And so you see people able to do those kinds of things, and that's what it's all about. That's just really cool.
I mean, critical voices will argue, rightfully so, that it's it's a horrific act to, the kerosene, the fuel, the CO2 of having an airplane to be in two places at the same time, the golf prep course training and the family. But my idea, sort of, maybe it's a fantasy, but a father being there for his daughter, not only will she grow up to have a better life, presumably. I mean, I missed my father when I was growing up, and I think I still kind of see the effects of that in my everyday life, right? But apart from that, or beyond, there are my hope that there are these principals, or maybe their heirs, who will then see the benefit of mental health and donate or support startups that they see, because the real is also raising capital to go into mental health. So I see there is this connection that sometimes, yes, you have to spend some fuel on a trip that immediately seems to be a net negative for the planet, but the long-term effects of maybe this same golfer investing into climate tech startups later, or right now, I think we have to be mindful before we jump into conclusions and even worse judgments. And it goes for mental health as well as for how we categorize people. I mean,
Well, and to touch on that topic, I mean the environment and the planet is on everybody's mind. If it's not, it should be, and certainly on my mind, and it's certainly on the industry's mind. And I can tell you that that thankfully there's technologies, there are ways to mitigate that. There's this what's called sustainable aviation fuel, which is now starting to become more and more utilized, where they're basically taking used cooking oil from fast food restaurants and other applications and recycling it and making aviation fuel out of that. There's carbon credits that can be purchased to be able to offset the effects of the pollutants on the environment. So there's a number of different. That's a whole industry, a cottage industry that's starting to develop to be able to mitigate this because the younger generation, especially, is concerned about that, and they should be. I'm concerned about it, but aircraft today, each generation of aircraft that's being produced is more and more efficient fuel wise, and eventually maybe aircraft will run on hydrogen or some other kind of fuel that's not a pollutant. But in the meantime, we have ways to mitigate it. So that's the good news there. And we try to help people that are interested in that. And if there's somebody in the audience that wants more information about that, how can I fly my aircraft without feeling guilty about it? We have ways to help mitigate that. And so there are pathways that have developed in order to do that.
amazing, amazing.
And then the other thing you said too is you're absolutely right. I mean, the successful people are the ones that are investing in family offices, are the ones that are investing in new technologies. So whether it's new technologies for climate mitigation or new technologies and resources for mental health, I mean, all of those things are necessary. And that's the great thing about the real is it's attracting, people, many of whom are investors, many of whom are interested in not just participating in some way or supporting the cause, but supporting it in a way that's actually going to help it, and that includes investment. And so I think that's another great aspect of the real.
100%. 100%. I interviewed, I think he was the first guest on a podcast ever, Peter Fusaro,
I
who,
watched that one. That was great.
yeah, yeah. And so now I see the synergies between sustainable fuel because Peter Fusaro is running the Wall Street Green Summit for now 25 years. So especially with the new generation coming online and having individuals like yourself who are in a let's say um, in an industry, and I mean private aviation is not commercial aviation, right? And we don't want to go too much into uh, these details, but I think the the importance of community and connection, whether that's around mental health, investments, and then private aviation and families. You made a very good point here. I want to thank you, really. I have a few more questions regarding a little bit more about the technicalities of private aviation. I think it would be nice for the audience to hear a little bit more about one aspect, which could be how, and this might sound a little bit controversial, but it's here, so let me see how someone might get taken advantage of in the process of a private aviation transaction, and why they might never know that they were taken advantage of. And the context here might be, I was just recently talking to someone who is consulting air, who all of a sudden inherited the wealth, the family office, all the company, the assets, and that person was completely overwhelmed. And and so maybe you have this aircraft, or so how does somebody get taken advantage of by the during the process, basically?
Well, that's a great question, Benjamin, because it's a big issue in our industry. The short answer is there's a lot of ways to be taken advantage of in private aviation, unfortunately. And that's why it's really important that people work with someone that they trust, somebody that's been in the industry a while, somebody that's recognized by other people. It's not just enough for you to recognize them, but they have to be recognized by other people, just like we select any other kind of advisor. It's the same with private aviation, and it usually comes by way of a referral or a recommendation, or some kind of vetting that shows that yes, this person's been around a long time, they're highly respected in the industry, they're they're not going to take advantage of us. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the industry that are new, and they do take advantage of people. One of the ways is somebody is looking to get involved in private aviation and they get sold something that they really don't need. So, for example, they might just need, you know, to fly 50 hours a year. They're just trying to dip their toe in the water. They're trying to, you know, test it out, see if it works for them. And somebody somehow talks them into buying an aircraft that they really don't need. Or if they do buy an aircraft, they buy the wrong aircraft. They buy the wrong size of aircraft for what they really need. Or they buy an aircraft that's got a bunch of maintenance coming up in the next 3 years, and they're going to be stuck with a huge bill, which is what happened during COVID. People were just scrambling to buy airplanes because they wanted to buy anything. Well, then they come to find out that 2 years from now, there's engine overhauls, gear overhauls, other types of things. It needs a new Wi-Fi system. And so, they have a $2 million bill waiting for them, 24 to 36 months from now, and they knew nothing about it. So, um, another thing that happened during COVID is people would buy an aircraft without an inspection just because they wanted to get it done quickly. And the sellers would not allow, they were basically not allowing the aircraft to be inspected. They're basically selling aircraft as is. Well, it's like you buying a house without having a basement inspection. You would never do that. You want that basement inspected. You want the house inspected, the windows, the heat system, everything inspected to make sure you know what's going on. And then the same thing with an airplane. You don't ever want to buy an aircraft sight unseen because you never know what you're going to find. And that's the thing is people bought these airplanes and they went to inspect them. And they're like, wait a minute, you've got corrosion, you've got engine overhauls that are due, you've got, things that need to be mandatory service bulletins. And, they had big surprises after that. And it just caused a lot of problems. So there's a lot of ways to be taken advantage of in this industry, but the good news is you don't have to be taken advantage of. The people that get taken advantage of are the people that are kind of losing common sense in how to access this industry. And so, by getting a good referral, a good recommendation, by working with somebody that's got a good track record, you're going to mitigate most of those kinds of problems because one solid person in the industry is going to be kind of the gateway to the other solid people. A person with a high reputation is never going to refer a customer to somebody who's not trustworthy. So, by finding that one person that is trustworthy, you can then trust that their recommendations are also trustworthy. That's just how it works. It works whether you're talking to your banker or your insurance agent and you ask for a referral for something else, they're only going to refer people that they trust. And so the main thing is getting that journey started off on the right foot, and then vetting people as you go, but also making sure that you're dealing with people that you can trust. And that's the main antidote to this phenomenon where people get taken advantage of.
Mm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It may not be exactly a pertinent question, but I remember it was on our deck as well here, and it's a question about entering new networks as an outsider. Now, I don't know, because you were in Brazil, you were born in Brazil, you already were kind of entrenched in aviation, but at some point you entered into the realm of high net worth individuals and corporations and everything, and you were going through this process of sort of exploring and discovering new networks as an outsider. If you wanted to touch on that briefly, I would be super excited to hear you speak about your experiences back then, because to me, similar, I'm in a place right now where I'm also discovering new networks, and I would be curious, and I'm sure a lot of the audience would also like to hear your approach to building new relationships where you cannot really assess them 100%. You may not be able to ask people, do you know this person? But still kind of you want to build that relationship because you feel there is a certain legitimacy, and you want to kind of have that first approach or warm up, if I can say so.
Well, I guess I have a 12-year-old son, and one of the things that I'm starting to spend time with him on is helping him to understand the skills that he's going to need in the future that really matter. And one of the skills that we've talked about is one of the greatest skills that people can have in the future is just the ability to accept and deal with and embrace change. That's one of the skills that anybody needs to have, but especially young people. The other one is building relationships and maintaining relationships. And so that's another skill that I'm trying to teach my son how to do, and just the importance of building relationships and nurturing relationships and tending to relationships almost like you're tending to a garden, right? A garden is something that you have to tend to daily. And if you do that, then you're going to have a healthy, fruitful garden. But if you don't, then it's going to have a lot of weeds, and you're going to get behind in keeping it up. And it's the same thing in the business world and in life. And so even though I grew up in Brazil and knew the language, I really had never done any business there. And so when I got into my professional career and I started my company, and then I ended up consulting with a company in Canada that wanted me to go to Brazil and help open that country for them. And I didn't know anybody. I went to Sao Paulo, which is a city of 20 million people, without knowing one person. So how do you start? Where do you start if you're trying to meet high net worth people and high net worth individuals and family offices in a city of 20 million? Let's say you grew up in Japan, and then you went back to your home country, and then, down the road, you got hired by a company that said, hey, go back to Japan and build us a business. And you knew how to speak Japanese, but you didn't know anybody. And so that was the situation that I was in. And I guess what I had to do, Benjamin, was essentially just really focus on basics, just really focus on just basic relationship building. And that involved a lot of outreach, a lot of just going and meeting people where they were, usually over coffee or a lunch or a dinner, some kind of meal or some kind of shared experience like that. And then really focusing on them and really hearing their story and hearing what they're involved with and what their pain points were, and not making it about me or my company or my venture at all initially. And so it really is a skill that it has to be cultivated. It's something that you have to take the long view. You cannot, it's not a short-term thing. There's no way to short circuit it. And it builds on itself. It builds on itself because the more people you meet, the more referrals you're going to get, the more referrals you're going to get, the more people you're going to meet. And it just takes time. And that just is something that maybe some people aren't patient enough with, or they want quicker results. And while we all need results at some level, when it comes to building relationships, it really is something that needs to be, you have to take the long view, and you have to take the view of, what's important for the other party on the other side of the table, on the other side of the conversation. It's not just about me. It's not just about my interests. It's really about them and what they have going on. And if I can add some value in some way, maybe somebody just needs to be listened to. And, maybe somebody just needs to be heard. And, and that's it. That's the conversation, and we'll catch up next time and maybe go into more depth about something, but it really takes a sixth sense. Relationship building is a skill. It is a skill. It takes a sixth sense to know how to do it. The people that know how to do it really well. And so I try to learn from those people. I try to listen to their podcasts. I try to read their books. I try to read their white papers. I try to follow their LinkedIn connections or LinkedIn posts and kind of hear what their perspective is. What's some little twist or nugget that I can come away with and become better at what I do in terms of building a relationship and really building it in a way that's valuable for the other person and not just valuable for me. And so that's just kind of the general formula that I've used and that's worked well. It's a work in progress. You're never done. We all have many relationships that we're managing. We have relationships with significant others, with our kids, with our brothers, sisters, neighbors, um, business associates, clients. I mean, if you look at the categories of relationships that we have, it probably dozens and dozens of kinds of relationships, but they all have to follow some basic recipe for success, or there's going to be problems in those relationships.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we hear a lot, especially in the last 20 or 30 years, as people have gotten busier and traveled more and gone out and done business, is this whole concept of quality time. And that, well, we don't have a lot of time, but let's make it quality time. Well, I believe in quality time. I really do. But I also believe in quantity time and that there's no substitute for quantity time. And so, part of that formula is allowing for conversations, interactions that don't have a set time limit. And it's just a different way. If you have a conversation that you're in, and you've given it 1 hour that you've got to be done because you've got to go do something else, then that conversation is going to be affected by the fact that you've got that limitation. And now not every conversation can be open-ended, including this one, but it's, at some level, there's conversations that, you just let them flow and you let them happen and you listen to the other person and you help them feel heard. And that relationship is most likely going to be stronger and better because of that. So those are the things that I've done. It's not perfect. Like I said, it's a work in progress, but it's relationship building is one of the key skills that, and not just relationship building, but relationship tending, relationship maintenance, relationship cultivating is one of the primary skills that we're going to have now and in the future, as well as our ability to accept and deal with change, our ability to adapt. Those are all things that are going to be critical, not only now, but into the future. There's no question.
Thank you so much. You've been sharing generously different aspects that I find very valuable. I want to conclude with the final question. And the name of this podcast is Theory of Change, which I borrowed from the impact investing world from a good friend of mine. Because if you have sort of an understanding of the world and you see maybe how it's broken in certain parts, or you just want to have an impact, you got to have some understanding of how you're going to bring about that change. And so my final question for you, David Clark, on this podcast today is, what is your personal theory of change?
Well, I think I'll go back to, when I got my theology degree, I spent 3 years just interacting and grappling with and thinking about just the whole place in the universe. Like we are, I mean, a speck is too large of a word to use for what we are. And you look at the Artemis 2 astronauts that just came back from the moon and the things that they said and these discoveries that the astronomers are making about just how just unbelievably large that the universe is. And we are a little dot in the universe. And we are here for a limited amount of time. And we are, and the thing about the limited amount of time is we don't even know how much that is. So we are literally here on this planet for a very, very small amount of time. So my theory of change is we have to find ways to utilize our time in the best way, in the most significant way possible. Um, Not only by not wasting it, but by utilizing it in the most effective ways that we can. And that's the most gratifying thing that I have in my profession in private aviation is helping families and busy high net worth individuals and executives do that, where they can literally double, triple, 4x, 10x their productivity, their effectiveness by utilizing their time in the very best way possible. Private aircraft is not the only way to manage time. We manage time with calendars, with executive assistants, scheduling software. There's a lot of different things that we can do, but a private aircraft is truly a game changer. It is a way of leveraging your time and influence in ways that are not possible otherwise. And if you don't do it well, then you're going to be leaving influence on the table. You're going to be leaving things on the table that you didn't have to leave. There's an opportunity cost to not flying privately. The question then is, once you get the why resolved, is how and what. And that's where I come in and others come in and can help guide and direct and advise and so forth. So I just really believe that, our place in the universe is you know, is small, but it's not insignificantly small. We're still significant. Every person on Earth is significant. Small of a planet is that we live on, each person is still significant. And each person, hopefully, in their own way, is trying to find a way to be as significant as possible for whatever time that they have on this earth. And by using a private aircraft, somebody can vastly increase their effectiveness and therefore their significance and their legacy by using their time in the very best way possible. And that's my theory of change. Is if you truly want to change your world, you've got to not just 2x or 3x your effectiveness, you've got to 10x it. You've got to do things completely different. You've got to think about time in different categories. You've got to think about influence in different categories. You've got to think about legacy in different categories. Aviation is just one tool to help you do that. It's not the only tool, but it's a really important tool. And that's what I'm just blessed to be able to help people with every day and to allow them to live truly extraordinary lives by leveraging their time that they never would be able to do otherwise. So that's my theory of change.
Thank you, David. It was amazing. I think we have a lot of golden nuggets here, and I wish you best of luck in you're a multiplier. You're making your clients 10x on their impact and their influence. And I think you also open up their minds to what's still possible. Like some people, they get it and they hear this and they're like, yeah, why didn't I think of this before? But others, I would include myself, not that I'm able to purchase a jet. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about how to scale my effectiveness. And AI, for example, is a tool. I can speak to it. it prepared our podcast session. Wasn't it phenomenal? It was a very nice mixture of personal instinct, intuition, and then the guiding principles from the AI. So yeah, I think you're helping the planet in that sense, really. So I'm very proud that you came onto the show and we were able to spend this time together.
Well, and we have a podcast on aviation, and we didn't talk that much about aviation because it's not about the aviation. It's about all these other things that you mentioned. And so, thank you for this opportunity. And if I can add value to anybody out there, then I'm always available. And it's just a privilege to be able to help people in this way. And it's just a lot of fun as well. So, thank you. Thanks so much, Benjamin.